So now let's get on to our next speaker. This speaker is Vice President and Chief Enterprise Architect at Danaher, where he is partnering closely with the architects across the company to lead strategy, development, establish technology standards, governance processes, and identify opportunities for modernization and transformation. Prior to Danaher, he was VP of Global and Global Head of Architecture at Walgreens Boots Alliance, and he held a similar role at Medtronic. He's also a certified professional co-active coach, chair and co-founder of the Chief Architect Forum, a leadership member of the Women in Architecture Initiative, and he holds various board advisory roles out of Chicago, Illinois. Please welcome to the stage Grant ECKER.
Thank you so much. What an honor to be here. What a great event. I mean, the production, the quality of the conversations, just take this morning, for example, just incredibly moving. It's been a wonderful couple days. I so appreciate everyone who's made this all come together. Let's take a minute and talk about taking a people-first approach to digital transformation. Sounds pretty crazy, right? Like, how would you go about this? And I think you'll see as I take this apart, it all kind of comes together. So first, I want to start with the question I've heard more than anything this entire conference is, what is Danaher? Fair enough. It's one of the largest companies a lot of folks haven't heard of. And you can kind of see on the breakout, we've got a biotechnology group with Cytiva and Paul. That's about $8.8 billion of our business. We have life sciences with a number of brands. It's around $7 billion. We have a diagnostic space as well, where we do blood testing and things of that nature. And that's around $10 billion. And then we're actually spinning off $4.8 billion of our businesses in the environmental and applied sciences area. That's going to be called Veralto, so under its own ticker, soon to come. And this has been announced in several of our external conversations. So that's a little bit about what Danaher is and where we are today. Let's talk about Grant. So who is Grant? All right, so I'm the Vice President, Chief Enterprise Architect at Danaher. And my background is kind of a growth through technical roles, right? I started early in my career at Stanford, actually, as an intern at WAMNet, building out some e-learning. General Mills, I was a manager in there and kind of grew up through first technology leadership and then eventually leading the collaboration space. And then it was at Lowe's where I took that collaboration role, stabilized it, and then needed someone to help out in HR. And I've always had my eye on this architecture space. I thought it was fascinating. So as I got to help the group build their org chart, I saw a box I really wanted, which was helping to deploy architecture in a formal way. And I asked the VP of EA, hey, would you make a bet on me? And I kind of played that role part-time while I finished up the HR gig. And that kind of led me to this current chapter where I've kind of done this rinse and repeat, including at Lowe's, of taking reactive architecture organizations, engaging a broader community, embedding into enterprise processes, and trying to get a more proactive approach, eventually bridging all the way forward into the boardrooms to be able to have a strategic role in decomposing where the company is trying to go into the key capabilities and incubating where those sort of foundational cornerstone programs are going to land in IT before we ever get there. And of course, the last bit here, I've become an executive coach, which honestly, seems a little odd, right? Architect and coach, but honestly, what is a chief architect? There are two things. One, we're the chief family counselor to the CIO and their staff. We kind of help them come together. And two, we're the chief coach to the technical community. So actually, the skills I developed there have been incredibly helpful in just my day-to-day role of helping to empathize and understand different points of view and bring people together. So let's talk about this people-first approach. First thing I'm going to do is talk to you a little bit about architecture's role in that journey. Then I'm going to take you through a little bit more around a framework of how to break through structural and human behavioral barriers. And then lastly, keeping pace with the emerging technologies with our architecture community. All right, let's get into the first part of this. And I'm going to show you a picture that's probably going to immediately take you to a topic that's not on the agenda, but it's come up every single conversation. All right, so what we're looking at here is the levels of learning and learning loops. Where does your mind immediately go? Someone just yell it out. Artificial intelligence, right? That's how it works. It's loops of learning, okay? So in the first loop, we're going to have insight into our actions. In the next outer loop of that, we're going to have insight into what our assumptions are on what actions we should be taking. And in the furthest out loop, we have context on where these things need to be occurring in our organizations and what's important. So what does that loop look like? Effectively, it's a simple question every time we come through our action cycle. What can be improved next time? This is how machine learning works, right? This is how we work. It's how we constantly improve and up our game. So taking that back to the learning loop, these are the 3 questions we're answering in each of these loops. First, are we doing things right? Second, are we doing the right things? And third, how do we decide what is right? And these are incredibly important questions because they really narrow us in on the work that we're going to be doing as we execute it across the community. So let's talk about where architecture plays in this space. I haven't really explained what architecture is other than giving you a cute metaphor, right? So architecture at the highest level is facilitating the enterprise level activities that are needed to enable our strategies. We translate the intent of the strategy into the guidelines for execution. Strategy to execution, that's architecture's game. So in that outer loop, right, collecting the vision and creating the process to decide what is right, this is really about the principles, the guardrails, the governance processes, the priority of outcomes, right? Is it enablement, is it security, and the methodology? And how do we decide when we have a business enablement priority and a CISO that are kind of challenging each other, saying, wait, this isn't secure, but we need it because this is where the market is going. Okay, how do we reverse the tape or accept the risk, right, to come up with that right answer? That's all about how do we decide what is right. Architecture is foundational in that purpose in an organization. Then there's applying IT guardrails in the planning activities. So we now kind of have an understanding of what that strategy is. We apply that lens into strategy planning. We hear things that are related to a strategic imperative or maybe actually in contrast to a strategic imperative and elevate that. In annual planning, we start to find out where the focus is and ensure that's aligning. We even look at application portfolio management and technology portfolio management and try to make those connections back to make sure we're focusing on the right things. And then build standards, patterns, and roadmaps that give us the plan to get there. And then last, right, how are we going to do things right? And that's really about ensuring that design rigor and solution trade-offs are aligned with that strategy. This sounded good when we were planning it, but is that plan that you're putting together moving us forward on our single sign-on approach, right? Is it moving us forward on our plans to try to consolidate and simplify ERPs as opposed to customize yet another one? And to bring forward those conversations at the right time where those challenge the strategy at the appropriate levels at the appropriate time. So what is architecture doing? We are effectively codifying the transformation. Now, one of the challenges I've seen in most architecture groups that don't end up doing so well is they think they know all the answers. We're a bunch of smart people sitting in the room. Well, of course we know what's right. Like, how could anyone question us? We are clearly the architects. We're here for a reason. Well, let me tell you that humbleness is one of the most important characteristics I would say you need as an architect. Because it isn't about us. It's about us enabling those people around us to execute. So what is our machine learning feedback loop on the context? It's the business. It's the IT leaders. They're helping us decide, what is right and how we decide what is right. We need them to shape that because it isn't us ultimately responsible for the P&L. We have to listen to the folks that actually have to carry that risk, carry that operational concern, bring this stuff forward, right? And then our assumptions. Are we doing the right things? Well, let's ask our experts in that space. And that's business as well, right? That includes people in compliance. That includes people in privacy, right? Are we doing the right things? Is there a new privacy initiative coming out of Europe that we have to react to, right? This is important for us to understand so it can be applied into our actions. Are we doing things right? Which is, as we implement these solutions, are we taking into account the evolving standards, the evolving expectations in compliance, the evolving needs of our business? And this effectively is the people-guided transformation. So let's talk about how we codify it, right? How does that framework that we create actually start to break through the human and structural behavioral challenges we have in our transformation efforts? So this is a bit of a kind of high-level picture. Now, in blue, we've animated in the back here. By the way, lots of needless animations. It's very important. We have to have those. That is the common architecture principles, right? And effectively, those principles are there to anchor back to what the strategy is trying to achieve. We need to be applying that lens as we take an intake of, is this thing important? Should we be engaging in it? We can only engage in 30%, at the top 30% of what matters to an organization. And even then, we don't do it all at the corporate level. We figure out where that decision needs to be made and the depth of what's required and what needs to be reviewed and where. So in this case, I've kind of picked operating company number 4 as the primary ball on this, and that's fine. And the overall corporation is really only curious about one thing. If you're going to put this in, just make sure you're following, we'll just use that a previous example, this SSO pattern, because we're moving from A to B. Okay, cool. So it comes out of that operating company's design and review, and it publishes back up to the corporate layer where all the operating companies are together. We call them the chief architects across all the companies, review the outcome. And they're going to say, wait, this isn't green. It's at best yellow because we didn't follow that thing. Remember that design pattern around single sign-on? Oh, right. But within this closed loop, we can fix it, right? We can go back to that team, let them know, okay, we got to make a change before we go live. We're going to publish yellow, not green. But that becomes a calmer in and out of this box, right? Because we can go back inside and fix it within our own community before it gets communicated externally, and we have to kind of reverse the tape. So this is really setting people up to win. That's the idea. We have the expectations clear up front of what and where needs to be created. We kind of provide that guidance around, hey, this is the emerging trend. Make sure you embed that into the design. And on the other side, oops, they didn't quite get it. Let's help them out, right? Let's say, hey, this conditional approval, we want it to move forward, but please fix this before production or shortly thereafter. So within one of these operating companies, you've got me off to the right, and then you've got the architect, the enterprise architect representing and really connecting across the operating companies, connecting with the architects in the operating companies. And this is really about understanding our desired business outcomes local to that context, curating our architecture offerings to complete in the space they need, and also connect it to the spaces that are maybe broader needs across the broader organization, and then executing in partnership. And as each of these groups execute, they're also going to split things into 2 different types of work. Strategy work, where we're going to be trying to figure out what the target is, our roadmap to get there, and a plan, and the design work to be able to go, okay, this is the right team we need to build to put this into place, which includes engaging the right experts. I'll be talking about that in a few slides. Putting the review in, and then ultimately moving into build. And we do this with an engaged architecture community. This is something that in a company like what I've found, actually pretty consistently across the last 3 organizations I've been a part of, even 4 really, there's probably 200-ish people, right, or so in each of the companies I've worked for that are part of this community. You talk to people that are practicing architects in the middle, and you bring the interested and aspiring folks off to the right. It could be people that are just kind of stakeholders in this space, like your application owners. It could also be the business analyst that wants to be a business architect, or the technical lead that's ready to become a technical architect. It becomes a bit of a talent pipeline and a place to develop folks, as well as a place to share learnings, communicate wins, and also bring the right challenges to the right people. And as we do that work together, this is where things get kind of exciting. We create what I like to call the architecture talent fountain. We bring in talent from all across the organization. We elevate that community's engagement and their contributions as it resonates to strategy. We're going to bring forward the cloud person at the right time and talk about how they've built a tenant strategy for deploying AI, right? We're going to bring those people into the light so that they get a broader exposure and they also start to get a little bit more visibility beyond their own scope and how it plugs into the broader picture. We export architecture talent into the organization. What a great way to build enterprise thinking in our companies, to have architects that have been in this space that are now applying that knowledge in their own space, building their own roadmaps, and starting to really try to drive change across that organization. And then, of course, growth within the architecture function. You can come in at manager or senior manager levels, and the sky's the limit, right? Vice president or CTO, even many architects eventually become CIOs. So it's a wonderful path upwards as well. So let's talk about those human barriers that I mentioned a little bit earlier, right? So we're going to bring insights to the community, engaging our business leaders to contribute in our strategies and to support our imperatives. Understanding the strategy and opportunities from IT leaders to activate the technical community and drive outcomes and change. Engaging peer functions to find the consistent solutions to mitigate risk. Now, all these things together sound interesting, but at the end, what we're really avoiding is FOMO, and not invented here, and you didn't engage me, right? If we activate the community of folks that really should be touching a solution at the right moment in time, and they feel like they were able to impact our approach, they're going to be a lot more likely to support it. Usually the barriers we experience are from people who weren't engaged, who have a problem because their strategy is not aligned to where the solution is going, or they just don't have time. And this is yet another thing landing on their plate too late in the journey, right? Those are most of the transformation barriers I've run into. Very seldom it's just, I don't want to do this, or I don't agree, right? Usually it sounds fine, but this is coming out of sequence in my work and making me uncomfortable. We can help smooth that out by connecting those concepts with them earlier and generating insights. And where maybe things aren't making sense, we can elevate those insights into proposals that we can take to leadership and say, hey, this sounded good as we were putting it on a piece of paper, but we got the experts engaged early in the project. We're not even through design yet. We're still really in that analyze phase. These are some things we should tweak in the scope. Or this is the trade-off we're going to make when we move forward with this. Is everyone okay with that? And when you get the right people to sign up at the right time, the debate's over. We're going to take a trade-off. We're going to move forward. And that kind of earlier escalation, earlier contribution, and earlier engagement creates less barriers to change. So just like I was talking about the folks that we need to engage, we have to be paying attention to what the organization is telling us. The biggest resets I've seen in architecture, and I've seen many of them, is when an architecture organization fails to realize the strategies and the decisions that they're trying to uphold no longer align with what the business wants, right? A bunch of smart people in a room deciding what they know is best, and they're totally aloof and disconnected with what actually matters. This is what we have to be watching for. It usually lands in the moment of a recommendation for a solution or an elevated risk that we should be super concerned about, and no one cares. Wait, hold on. We have to know why no one cares. That's a really important moment. We can't just continue to try to ram at the wall continuously. This is a moment, wait, there's a wall here. This is structural, what happened? And find out which learning loop is the place that we have to adjust. Is it something we have to do differently, right? It's just, oh, okay, we're implementing this approach, we're shifting vendors, we need to be implementing with this approach. No one told us? Great, now we know, right? Is it the right things to do? We missed something. There's a new compliance requirement. We have to be adding in scope for this. Or this particular approach, we were looking at building out a new business unit. We were really excited about it. We're not talking about it a lot anymore. We were kind of hoping you'd get the hint. We're not doing this, but we got a little bit of pride, and we're not going to really say that that's shut down, but it is. We need to know that, right? So that we can stop echoing comments that we're actually kind of hoping to bury, and then deciding what is right. Do we have new leadership, right? Is there a new sheriff in town? We're not asking the right sheriff anymore. We're going over here, but the decider's over here. We need to shift our approach and shift our ways of working, shift our governance process to match what the organization is telling us. So let's talk about keeping pace with emerging technologies with architecture communities, right? So I talked about this idea a little bit, but we'll get there in a few slides. But understanding the strategy and being really close to that and constantly paying attention to as that evolves allows us to narrow in on the innovation trends that are going to drive the most important outcomes. Because I have to tell you, if you just want to do trend spotting and go after any trend out there, you're going to like see the Gartner report. My favorite one was smart dust. What's that? No one cares, right? That's not something that matters. So you have to be able to kind of move the noise from the things that are actually going to drive value. So understanding that actually helps us start to curate our target technology roadmaps in the areas of the greatest interest. Okay, cool. So we're going to be going after cognitive. Great. So we need to build some competency in that space in each of the areas that touch it. That's super helpful. So now, as we build our architecture design teams, which I'll show you on the next slide, we're going to bring the most knowledgeable experts in for those areas. But now we can empower those experts to think beyond their scope in a particular way, right? Hey, for cognitive, for AI, how are you adapting your space? How should we adapt our thinking? Teach us, learn with us, right? We might bring consultants in to help us as well. But the idea is that as we build these architect design teams, they start to actually empower this community to develop the skills they need to start to drive out those future trends into executable strategies. So, for example, if we have, let's say in a digital space, we want to deploy a chatbot. Okay, cool. So the subject matter experts in this space need to really understand how is that going to live in context to the broader solution? What are the best practices for deploying a chatbot as a part of your solution? How do the integrations work, at the solution architecture level? Cool. Let's bring our security architects in who are going to engage privacy and understand what are the rules of the road, what repositories can we let the AI crawl, right? Where does that AI need to live? We've talked about it a lot, and one of the things that just as a personal thing for me, I hope nobody goes back after this conference and says, we have to get comfortable using ChatGPT. No, you have to get comfortable using AI. ChatGPT, maybe the OpenAI platform, you can expose it through a private link, through Microsoft is one vendor that does this, right? That actually keeps the knowledge graph on your own tenant, right? That makes that learning your property. But training somebody else's AI is a real concern. You're going to learn more about how to secure our environment. We're going to learn from an attack on Danaher, and it can help another company out from another threat actor. That's a wonderful thing. I want to contribute to that. Just honestly give me the community's learning as my in trade for my contribution to that learning. But there's no downside to me in making the community better at fighting cybercrime, right? Now, on the flip side, what about AI that spies on my knowledge workers as they develop our IP? Miro just released a few weeks ago an update, a little button, and it's a little magic button in the corner. Miro is a whiteboarding app. If you click the magic button, your individual users will be prompted to agree to new IP terms that your corporation has no idea is happening. They click that button, oh, of course, sure, yep, good. Now, when they click a button, on one of their post-its, they can now activate a whole bunch of AI-generated post-its. Super fun, this is great. What they don't realize is happening, and if you read the terms that Miro published as this occurred, was they were actually building their own knowledge graph from all of their customers to create their own brain, and effectively stealing your IP in the process. And what's the definition of spyware? It's really spying on you as you do your work and taking data that you don't know is being stolen from you. That is what that is. So we have a responsibility as IT leaders to help our organizations be smart about how they adopt. That's what a security architect might notice in this space and start to play into it. So just stole a few minutes there to share some of my thinking as we were going through some of the other sessions too. And then in cloud, what's the right way to deploy in our tenant? What's the right way to build a solution architecture in this space? Let's have them become the experts. We might bring a consultant in to show them how it's done for the first time, but then they start to cut their teeth. And this is one of the great ways we can chase trends. And it's not even the technical stuff that limits it. The business architects might be finding, how do these things work in general? What are the best ways to build solutions that do this? What can we borrow from this that we can use in another solution? Right? There's a lot of great things that can happen at each of these altitudes. And this is the same group of people that we engage to make sure that the right parties are involved as we move from an idea into a design that we're going to build. and how we can stop those transformation barriers from happening as well, because the people are engaged. So I've got some parting advice before we have some time for questions. The first is, many of you have architecture organizations within your companies. Leverage it in this way, right? Leverage architecture to codify and sustain your digital transformation. It's literally why we exist. I mean, we can definitely check your math and see if something's deploying in a way that's going to, be a problem, right? That we're going to have some issues with resilience as it goes live. We can do that. That's how we started. But that isn't the real value of what architecture can do for your companies. It can be a huge change agent driving the things that you really want to modernize in your organization. Second, build consistent structure and sustain collaboration to break down barriers. Really build this as a change management megaphone. Have 200 people meetings on once a quarter with all the people that touch the architecture community and share out what's working and where we're going and what we're learning together, and celebrate those successes. And have leadership, both from IT and the business, join these sessions to encourage the continued adoption of this. Because a lot of those folks, there's some folks, direct reports in the architecture organization, that's just a small handful. Usually we're dwarfed by the people who engage in that broader community. So that's sometimes seen as optional activity. It's really important that those folks are recognized for contributing and choosing to participate in something like this. It's just something I personally believe in. And then let's map our strategy to trends within our architecture designs, and that will help us keep pace with relevant innovation. But doing so, align to strategy, because without that filter, we're off just following every Gartner hype curve out there, and it's really kind of mindless. It's very hard to support and sustain. So the most important advice I'll leave you with is don't lose sight of what matters. As you look at this picture, there's 4 things that stand out to me. It's the people. And it's the results. That's our legacy as leaders, right? It's the people we brought along with us, how we made them feel in the journey, and the results that we created together. So this isn't just someone to give you feedback as you loop around, right? It's someone to get to know at all levels of depth. And I encourage the architects, as they all have their circles of people, right? Don't just use that as a transactional lever to get the data you need, right? That's a byproduct. You're going to get to know these folks inside and out and really embrace those relationships. Build trust. Build a partner in your change journey. Because I have to tell you, you're going to disagree from time to time. And there needs to be a bigger arc of your relationship and appreciation with these people. You have to find the things you value, and they will find the things they value in you. And even if you don't agree, at least you guys have these common ground to come back to and to really sustain that relationship for the challenge after this one and the challenge after that one. And that transparency and that trust you create is what honestly allows you to make all this impact occur. Because folks know if they're just a transactional engine, and they'll kind of back away from the table a bit. There's a much deeper relationship you can create there. So that's all I have for today. I've got about a few minutes for questions or just discussion, honestly, right? If any of this struck a chord, please raise your hand. We'd love to just let others hear what you're thinking.
Thank you for that excellent presentation. I really appreciated the fountain of talent as well as what you described. So really my question is just to hone a little bit more on the model that you shared between corporate and operating company. And when the operating companies want to move fast because they have very pressing timelines, or just that the empowerment is higher at an operating company in a matrix organization. How do you show the value proposition to that, there's a check-in needed at that, I would say that corporate level, that last box over there?
Yeah.
And how do you manage that tension as well between the operating company and corporate?
It's a great question. And every organization is going to have a different structure. For example, I'm not at GE, but stories I've heard, it's more of a central, right? We bring everything to the middle. So you don't have to ask permission, right? GE is going to decide. And if you honestly create that, it's kind of counter to the culture. But at Berkshire Hathaway, which is the other extreme, right? Those companies have no accountability to corporate other than a P&L, right? So Danaher's closer to the latter. So at Danaher, what's interesting is you'll see the words EA leads next to intake and at the bottom there as well. That's corporate. Corporate isn't, and I've changed what is that higher decision group to simply be all the operating companies. And a couple key functions in corporate, like that have a span across, like security, some of our enterprise apps. We talked about Workday just a moment ago, right? So those folks, right, as well as our infrastructure. And that community ultimately sits at the top, the middle, and the bottom of this funnel. So it's really accountability to themselves. Because as an OpCo-centric organization, it's really about having that, okay, we're OpCo-centric, and we all decided this is something that mattered across all of us. Are we good with what happened? And that conversation is echoed 3 times in this paradigm. So I don't think I would convince them that their work needed to be reviewed by corporate. I don't think I could. But I can convince them that when your space expands beyond your scope, do you want to know if everyone's with you? They generally do, and they also want those opportunities for common technology leverage, et cetera, but they're not willing to give up their decision rights. So this is my way to kind of blend it.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you.
Very welcome.
Appreciate it. You know, it's really acknowledging that tension and making them, you know, empowered for it. So thank you for those decisions. Thank you.
So I had to recently rethink architecture when I was heading enterprise architecture at Breville, and Breville was a very agile company delivering agile solutions. And one of the things that I had to really figure out was how do I involve the architecture within agile squads and within product owners, product managers, within a safe framework, right? So kind of curious of if some of the organizations that you worked at were facing that and what your approach to that was.
So product's really interesting, right? This works a little bit, but how product engages isn't like at this moment, right? It's not at, okay, we have a design, let's go get our team. No, it's the opposite. Architecture's only effective in product teams if they're embedded, right? They have to be relevant to that group. And the other thing with product teams is we have to be looking at it from an epic level, right? Are you redesigning your kitchen? My God, let me get out of your way, please. Have at it. You can borrow my sledgehammer, right? But if they want to expand out and make the kitchen bigger, or they want to go from a 2-car garage to a 3-car garage, we need to tag that sprint and say that's architecturally significant. You're modifying the landscape under which you exist, and we really got to take this opportunity and make sure we're not building a Winchester mansion, right? So, but trying to make sure I stay focused on your question, it's about, okay, so this sprint, this epic, that has relevance, and ensuring that we're activating the embedded architects in that group, but expanding. Architecture's main role in that moment, from my point of view, is realizing who isn't in the room and saying, wait, we need security. Wait, we need cloud. I know you guys don't normally work with these 2 guys. I know some of you may not get along, and that's also the chief coach part of our job, right? How do I help the architect in digital appreciate the stripes of battle of the architect in SAP? Helping them find each other is one of the other key challenges. But that aside, bringing them together at the right moment and saying, okay, your sprint stakeholder group is a little broader on this one, and getting the leadership along with you in that journey earlier when you look at epics, that's where I found success. But I will say some of these cultures are intentionally resistant to this, right? There's a type of leader I like to call the ERNL, which stands for intentionally resistant non-learner. They figure out that if they just get really good at saying they're sorry, that is going to get them their best outcome, because the outcome to them is on time, on budget, and delivered faster than anyone else. So rather than engaging this architecture group who might bring in other people that might slow them down with questions and things, right? They can just go, oh boy, did I mess this up again? Well, I'm super sorry. Can we just make this one go ahead? Or maybe I'll just change this small thing and we'll be good? Okay, cool. And they'll do it again next month, right? So how do you manage that? The outcomes have to be worse for the ERNLs than for the process followers. It's that simple. So you have to take a step back and make sure your process is designed so that ERNLs come in second. I don't want them to lose, but they have to come in second. Procurement, just got to stop them and go, have you had your EA review? Right before they get into their negotiations or even start to get into their solution design, right? Finance should be saying, hey, wait, before I release these dollars, are you guys architecturally significant? Did you go through your initial intake? You know, and they love this. These are great stakeholders to partner with because they often have an aligned incentive. They have more work to do than they can do. So if you take 3 off their punch list because they haven't done their homework, they're like, thank God. And when it gets to me, it'll be more firmed up. So great. Thank you. Someone else can do the homework. Oh, I'm not the bad guy. Talk to those architects, but they're really nice. They'll help. So I don't know, kind of a longer answer, Karsten, but had fun with that one. Thanks for the question. I think we have time for one more. He's coming.
So EA architecture role can be a gatekeeper as well as enabler.
Yeah.
So how do you balance it such a way that your value is visible bottom up? Top down, yeah, that's one other way, but bottom up as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What's in it for me, right? So going back to that talent fountain idea, that's one of the main things that's in it for them is we can help you get that exposure, right, to be brought forward at the right time. We can get you access to a broader set of your peers beyond your own scope. We can help you see how your piece plugs in, right? We can help you increase your influence without authority, your executive leadership engagement, right? On and on. And I think that's what's really, you have to have a what's in it for me, both for the company, like I spent most of the talk on, but also the individuals. And it's funny you mention it. Right now we're in the middle of rolling this out across the operating companies. I activated the chief architects about 6 months in, and now the chief architects of each of the operating companies are activating their communities. And the what's in it for me is one of the most important messages, right? And actually it's a really good story around, you know those soft benefits we all look for, or soft behaviors we all look for in performance reviews, the what and the how? Technologists always struggle with the how, right? And they look back at the end of the year, they go, hey, I got it done. And then the manager points to the path behind them and go, you see all those dead bodies? That's not good. That's not good. Can we do better on that, please? Well, this kind of community helps them build those behaviors and start to have those stories and examples of leadership through influence, of bringing others along, of becoming a change manager. And many folks are looking for that advancement in their career. So it's usually around, hey, IQ got you here, EQ is going to get you there. So this is a mechanism that can help you build some of that EQ. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you folks today, and also to everyone who put this conference together. It's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you.